Hey, my name is Sean Prokus, and I'm the pastor of communications here at Eastview Christian Church. And I'm really, really thankful to have three great people with me today who are way smarter than I am, and we're going to talk about mental health. So I'm just going to kind of facilitate the discussion and get out of the way because these are some great people. And so I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and go ahead and tell us a little bit about their background when it comes to mental health. Because when we're facing something like a global pandemic and this virus, obviously there's impacts of this, whether it's our households, our communities, or our society as a whole. And so we just kind of want to have a discussion around this whole coronavirus and how it's impacting the church, how it's impacting families, and how it's impacting our country and the world. And so I'll go ahead and we'll start with Sarah because I know her, I work with her. So Sarah, feel free to introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Sarah Thompson. I'm the pastor of Member Care at Eastview Christian Church. And for the first part of my career at Eastview, I was a professional counselor. I have a clinical license that I still keep active, even though I don't use it really anymore. And now I do pastoral care primarily, but that is my background with mental health, is that I used to do clinical counseling.
Jason, go ahead and introduce yourself. We're figuring this stuff out as we go. So go ahead, brother.
Well, yeah, as Sean said, my name is Jason Smith. Currently I'm the pastor of small groups at Eastview Christian Church. I too am a licensed professional counselor. I keep that licensure going. Mostly I do pastoral counseling, but before working in the church, I did a good amount of work with college students and young marrieds, both within a college setting and outside of that. And that's where a lot of counseling has come into play, and a lot of time with younger generation of people, counseling with males as well through male issues. And it seems like that pervades itself all the way through the church. So I feel like I use that background a lot, even as a pastor.
Okay, and last but not least, I'll introduce Tanya.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tanya Bassett, and I am a licensed clinical social worker. I'm a certified alcohol and drug counselor, and I'm a certified trauma therapist. So my specialties are in trauma and addiction, and I also treat trauma outside of the office in what I do is called intensives, and those are 3 to 5 day intensives where people come together, or families or individuals or couples, to be able to work on their past wounds, to be able to heal, and to be able to move forward.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. And it's great having you. And so the first question I wanted to ask is this. Obviously, we are, all believers. We all go to Eastview. And so I think it's appropriate to start a little bit, even before we dive into the pandemic itself, and talk a little bit about the church and mental health. And so the first question kind of is this: how does mental health integrate with our relationship with Jesus? And so, Sarah, would you mind go ahead and kicking us off with that one?
Sure. I mean, it's a big question. I could talk about a lot of different segments with that, but I think that when we think about mental health, we tend to think about mental health disorders versus like mental health wellness. And so when we think about our mind and our emotions and our spirit, our soul, and our bodies, they're all connected. And sometimes we forget about that because when we come to church, we're just thinking about our spiritual relationship with Jesus, when really all of it is created by God and used by God and can inform everything. So I think when it comes to our spiritual lives, we tend to neglect how our body fits into that, and how our body can feel emotions, can feel even pain, physical pain, and we can maybe even neglect our bodies and what they're trying to tell us about how well we're doing. But if we think about that, all of our lives are something that we bring to Jesus, that we give to him when we are a follower of him, then all of that stuff, emotions, our thoughts, all of that is kind of encompassed into our relationship with following Jesus. So that's kind of how I think about it a lot. And so we don't want to neglect the way we think and the way we feel. All of that is inclusive. So I don't know if you guys, Jason or Tanya, if you'd add anything to that.
I'll jump in real quick. So I really loved what you talked about. You said, some words, wellness, and I kind of got the picture of a puzzle. And there's lots of pieces that go together, right, for a puzzle to be complete. And oftentimes on Sundays, I just have that picture of myself, first of all, but then others as I say hi and I see them walking in, like, wonder how many pieces of the puzzle are connected well together, or that might be missing in the midst of that. And so I think mental health in general, mental wellness as well, plays a major role in the church and in our relationship with Jesus, that both can help us continue to grow and hinder us from growing as well. Yeah, Tanya, how would you say?
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And I think it's all interconnected. And so sometimes we tend to misplace part of that, and overlook mental health issues sometimes as a church. But I truly believe here at Eastview, we do understand those, and we really do want to help facilitate that wellness very holistically, mind, body, and spirit. And to be the person that God has created us to be. And that's really so important.
Yeah, and I appreciate, Sarah, you were talking a little bit about mental health, not just in terms of it being like things are broken, so then I go get fixed, but preventative. I think of it a lot of times as like the difference between, like, I don't wait till my car breaks down, I take it in for oil changes. And so, but a lot of people don't think of mental health that way. It's until there's a substantial blow or breakdown. And actually some of those could be prevented if we're more alert and more aware to our mental health and the signs at which we need help. And so I think there's a stigma sometimes around, like, for example, professional counseling. I go when I'm broke, and that's the point at which I reach out for help. And unfortunately, sometimes preventative measures could have really stopped some damage. And so I appreciate you sharing that. Let me ask you this. So let's dive a little bit into the virus itself then, because this is new. I mean, this is global pandemics, kind of a new thing in the history of the world. Unprecedented times, without question. There have been pandemics before in human history, but nothing quite like this. And so, and that's not to propagate fear or worry in stating that fact, but it is just a fact. We've had pandemics before, but they've primarily been localized or maybe in different parts of the world, but never global. So we're dealing with a new scale. So let me ask you this. What impacts have you seen this virus have on society today? How do you see this playing out in mental health, whether it's blooming to normal or within the church or within households? Jason, would you kick that one off?
Yeah, I had two thoughts real quick. One, I think just, personally with our family, I've been sharing this kind of with our small groups team, and we've all kind of said this, is that all the things that encompassed our family, all the ins and outs have now kind of been just ripped away. This may be a good way to say that, like an abrupt stop to lots and lots of things. And we have a bigger family, and so that means we had a lot of activities. Well, now we're together all the time. And that's, there's some great things with that. We have kind of recaptured that time. And so that's a really good thing. But it also is a reminder that we got some work to do on how we're interacting with one another. So I think that has a big impact. So I think a reprioritization in general is happening in the midst of this. But then I also think what it hits at is the underlying needs that we have. So from a pastor standpoint, from a small group standpoint, like, I firmly believe we're all created to connect with one another and to do life with one another. And then all of a sudden, when you're not able to do that in the way that you're used to, it kind of rips that part away, and you feel a little bit raw, and you're trying to figure out, well, how do I do this? And what does it look like now for me to connect with other people?
Tanya, go ahead and expound on that if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said there, Jason, exactly. And I do believe that this whole pandemic has created this uncertainty, this fear of the unknown. We're trying to navigate a new space that we have never been in. And there's a lot of unknown in that area. And for many people, that's not a comfortable place. And for people who have been through a lot of stress and overwhelm in the past, this is a place that they know. And they don't want to revisit. So there's a lot of fear around this. And what I'm hearing from my clients and friends is not so much the fear of getting the virus, but just the fear of the unknown. How long is this going to last? How is this going to impact me? How is this going to impact my family? Will we ever return back to normal? And those are all really normal, healthy questions to be asking and exploring.
Let me go ahead and jump
Yeah,
to the
I'm
next
seeing
one.
that kind of.
Oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Sarah.
yeah, go
Sorry
ahead.
to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that change has been hard. It sounds like to me, like the disconnection from people having to do things differently than we've had to do before. So we're having to learn things differently, and change is just stressful. And sometimes it even has some griefs with it. The loss of physical touch with people, the loss of in-person interaction. Sometimes people are talking about how the video chatting is like not as meaningful because there's something about being in person that's helpful. So there's just changes too that kind of create griefs.
Okay. Let me ask you this then.
And
Like,
really,
I'm a father of, go ahead, Tanya.
Oh, I was just going to say, God created us to be connected and interdependent. And so in this space that we're in, we're being called to do something different. And so that goes against the way that we're created. That goes against the way that our DNA is within us. And so to be able to try and navigate this space when it's going against what we know and what we know works for us and what soothes us and what helps take care of us is unnerving at times. And so we're really being called to, solicit different options here in a way that we haven't been before.
Yeah, if I could jump in on that real quick, even just from a family standpoint, we've had one of our sons just have a birthday in the midst of all of this. And normally we'd have a big party, and, it's during March Madness, both things that we really love to do, and we just aren't able to. And so, day by day, as we get closer to his birthday, there's grieving points, probably for all of us, but mostly for him. And so I, had enough insight to be able to help see that happening, even just with neighbors. Our kids are really close with some of our neighbors, and they love to play together. And we have to be distant so we can say hi, but we can't be in close proximity. We can't be in each other's houses right now. So our, everything's changed, right? That's a hard thing. There's lots of small grieving moments there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've got 3 teenagers right now, 13, 16, and 17. And it's the same kind of things that we're seeing, things that we took for granted now have kind of been ripped away. Same deal. I think our boys actually have the same birthday on the 13th. Yeah. And so we've got two boys there who both turned 16 on March 13th. And, like normally we have this tradition where, when it's our kid's birthday, they get to pick what restaurant we go out to, right, for their birthday to celebrate. Well, like we couldn't honor that obviously because the restaurants are shut down. And then we tried to do takeout, and just about every place he's picking, there's no takeout. So yeah, it's challenging and difficult. Let me ask you this, because being a father of 3 kids and also being a husband to my wife, Carrie, I'm trying to be alert and be a good husband and be a good father and be aware of what's going on with them. And so what are some symptoms that we need to look at when we're looking at family, friends, people at church, people that we have relationships with, where there are warning signs where they're struggling with stress or depression or anxiety? Tanya, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, so there are warning signs, and there are many, so I'll touch on a few, and then Jason and Sarah can add some more too. But really just noticing, we are called to shelter in place right now. So that's a form of isolation itself, it feels. But if you're noticing that people are spending more time in their rooms, like your children, if they're spending more time in their rooms, or family members that you're trying to connect with and they don't answer the phone. So just be really mindful of the people that aren't coming out. Also too, if people are talking about not sleeping well, not eating, always feeling like their heart is racing, feeling like they have a sense of doom, is really just helping them explore those things. Some of those are very normal. That goes with the territory right now, but also to be able to find a space of balance of, you know, is it consuming and is it crippling and paralyzing them versus they're acknowledging these things and they have resources to be able to move through those. So for those that you're interacting with or that you're seeing that don't have those resources, that they are crippled in that and paralyzed in that, and maybe they've been on the couch for days, they haven't been showering, they haven't been eating, they're talking about they don't have anything to look forward to. Maybe they're turning to old ways of coping that haven't been healthy in the past. So these are some of the things that really alert us to there's something more going on here, and to intervene on that. You know, whether we connect them with a counselor, whether we connect them with a friend, whether we drop something by their house, you know, whether we connect them with a pastor, but to be able to provide some resources to those people that are struggling right now.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I feel like you were pretty thorough in that. I mean, it's really, those are really good signs and symptoms. Yeah, and I'd say like it's really that persistence of those things too, like, and that maybe some suggestions don't help, you know, if getting out for a walk on a daily basis doesn't help, or if, you know, encouragements don't help, then there's signs that something more significant is happening and more professional help is needed.
All right.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
So just real quick on there. When Tanya was talking earlier, I think some of it depends on the relationships that we have with people, right? The knowledge that we have. So I wrote down something like what people are saying or not saying. And so if somebody is generally a more talkative person, let's say, and they're just not very talkative, that could be a sign of something that it may not be, you know, dire, but it could just mean that they're struggling through something. So giving them a prompt of how would you put to words what's going through your mind right now? You know, something of that nature, or you know, vice versa. That somebody that's not talkative, that is just talking like crazy. You know, I'm trying to paint extremes here, but those are some signs and symptoms of somebody that is they're acting maybe in a way that you just haven't seen from them in a while, or even before.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because with my family, for example, this was kind of, I don't want to say fun, but it was different, and there was a novelty behind it, you know, kind of like, oh, this is kind of different, and a real positive attitude on how we were going to handle this as a family. But I think the newness of it has kind of worn off now. We're beginning to see in our family with our kids, it's no longer kind of like an extended spring break. It's beginning to feel a lot like isolation. And I think what's kind of critical is there's a slow evolution to some of those dark places. And so just trying to be mindful in terms of it's not going to be like a light switch where one day it's like you've got somebody who's talkative and all of a sudden they stop talking. But so I think more than anything else with our family, I think we've been just trying to make sure we're really disciplined in terms of having our family Devo time at night and really opening up the floor to obviously study the word and pray, but also just a safe space to talk. And I think along with that too, trying to provide a space where we're offering each other a lot of extra grace. Because I think through all of this, all of us, whether it's me or my kids or my wife, have had a bad day in this, and there's probably more to come. And so just being extra graceful, trying to open up new venues of discussion, or expanding the ones that you already have. And so I think all of that stuff is really, really important, because I do think with these type of things that they manifest slowly over time. So let me ask you this, in talking about this and signs, what are some signs where maybe somebody needs professional help? Or how do you determine what you manage at home versus when it's time to pick up the phone, and whether you're dealing with your kids and you're taking them into their pediatrician, or you're working with your spouse and you recognize I may not have the tools to help this person? Like, where do you cross that gap? I'll pick on you, Jason. I like
Oh,
to
great.
we work together, so I feel like I can pick on you all the time pretty easily.
So I think I'll just speak from maybe more a family standpoint, and that because I want to allow a lot of space for Sarah and Tanya to speak into this. I think they'll have some good insight. But for me, and even from a family standpoint, and thinking about professional help versus just simply, hey, this is just kind of a bad day, so to speak. I think we just got to notice some of the patterns a little bit of behavior that's leading up to that moment. How's it trending? Are we trending? Is it kind of sporadic? Are we trending mostly in this direction? Are we trending down? If we're mindful, I think we've tossed that word around a few times, being mindful. And I think that means being able to breathe. Tanya has a good article that she just wrote about just breathing. And part of that is just to be aware of what's happening around us. And so I think being mindful, being aware of where we're trending, I think gets us close to a determination of which way to go on that. And then I'd love to hear Sarah and Tanya jump in on this one.
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and go, Sarah. What I've been seeing with my clients too is with this shelter at home is they're not able to work in the way that they have been. And so many people find their self-worth and how they contribute to the world and to other humankind is through their work. And so I've had clients that have said, I don't know who I am anymore without my work and taking care of people. I am not a teacher that stays home all of the time and teaches my kids. I just don't know how to navigate this space. And so when you hear someone saying those kind of things, yes, they're feeling really frustrated and overwhelmed. And I think that's important. That's a sign for us to step into that with them. Not just say, oh, you'll be okay, or, it's going to be over soon, or everything will be all right, because we don't know how long this is going to last. And we don't want to minimize what they're trying to express and what they may say or may not be saying that they need. And so to be able to step into that space with that person to help them explore that and find some options in knowing how to navigate this.
Yeah, I love that, and not acknowledging the pain and not cheering people up too quickly. I think the closer we are to people, the more tempting it is. I know for me personally, like I preach acknowledging our emotions and like not cheering people up too fast, but with my husband in particular, when he's having a hard day, like I just want to cheer him up fast, because as soon as he's better, I'm better, and that's codependency, 101. But the truth is that we don't have the answers here. And I think even pastors, we have a temptation to want to tell people, remind people of the hope of Jesus and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we can offer those hopes and truths too quickly because we're uncomfortable with what the person is feeling. And we don't want to feel that either. And so we want to get them through that faster than maybe really is helpful. And so, but allowing people to ask their questions, allowing people to feel their feelings. Oftentimes, if we give that space to someone, they actually move through it faster than if we had tried to push that down and tried to cheer them up too quickly. And so it's good to rein ourselves in, especially if we're trying to be a friend to other people and offer that space. I think we can say for ourselves, we kind of want that space sometimes to just be in a bad mood or ask our questions or just not really have somebody cheer us up fast either. So, so that's, thank you for mentioning that, Tanya.
And I would say too, that was good when you talked about, like, of course we believe in Jesus and there's hope, but hope doesn't necessarily like exclude grief or mourning. And so like, I think of Jesus and Lazarus and like, he shows up there and, being the Son of God, being the Messiah, he knows what he's going to do. He's bringing Lazarus back, but, he weeps and he feels that moment with Lazarus' family at that time. And so I'm confident through this difficult time that God's going to do something substantial with it. But at the same time, too, I think it's totally biblical to acknowledge the pain and grieve through it. And so just really important, because we can get, I call it Hallmark theology, where it's like a Hallmark card, you know, where you got your pocket of Bible verses and it's like, I got the answer. Let me give you one of my 5 verses. And there's total truth in the verse, but there's a substantial problem when we just shovel that kind of Hallmark theology people's way and forget to grieve. And in Jesus, I think about Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and he knows he's going to be resurrected. He's prophesied that, but he's sweating blood. And it says in that, you know, the text that his soul was deeply troubled. And so he knows the end game and there's hope, but while there's hope, there's also grief. And so I think sometimes the church approaches that a little weird. So let me ask you this. Let's get to the pragmatic side of this, because we've kind of talked about the context of this whole thing and what we should look for. But let's talk now about a little bit more of the pragmatic side of this, because probably everybody, whether it's at a deep level or more, maybe not run as deep for some people, everybody's going to struggle with some anxiety with this. Everybody's going to struggle with some loneliness. Everybody's going to struggle with some depression. And so what are some strategies to help people in this season of difficulty? I'll pick you, Tanya.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So, you know, there's a lot of things that we can do. You know, one of the things that we want to try and do, if at all possible, is stay structured during this time. And that's hard, you know, when we are not on the same timeline and the same time frame that we have been, it's hard to stay structured. But to try and keep your day structured as best as possible. The body likes to know what's going to be happening and have the structure set in place, so continue to do that. Also keeping the body moving. The body, if it gets fearful, it gets tense and tight and overwhelmed, and then the brain starts generating thoughts that say this is bad and bad things are going to be happening. And so it's going to be important to keep the mind and body healthy. So keep the body moving, continue to stretch, remind yourself that there are things that we do have that we can control, and being really mindful of what those things are and putting those things into place for ourselves is going to be very important. And then also I just want to add breathing. Breathing really allows us to reset that hypervigilant, overactive central nervous system. So focusing on our exhale, that exhalation breath really resets the central nervous system, so we can start to calm this whole thing down and think from a very factual space rather than an emotional space.
Let me throw this to you, Sarah. That's great stuff in terms of more of the tactile, physical side, the biological side. Sarah, what about the spiritual side in terms of, because we're talking about these different pieces here in terms of strategies to help you through this time. And that stuff's really awesome on the physical. What do you think in terms on the spiritual formation side?
Yeah, I think that the word, once you've kind of calmed your body down, I mean, I think that's important even going into the word, that if you're feeling uber stressed, you're not going to be thinking about what the word is saying. But once you've gotten yourself to that point, the Psalms are chock full of language that you might relate to. You know, Psalm 13 talks about how long, O Lord? I mean, like, well, that's their question right now. How long is this all going to last, right? And it has, you know, verses that talk about the sadness that we feel, maybe even the illness that we feel. And God has given us the Psalms even to say back to him. 40% of the Psalms are laments, and maybe this is a time in our spiritual walk that we get a chance to really learn how to ask our questions, maybe even be mad at God, have strong emotions towards him, but also cling to him with the other hand, like, because we tend to think that faith is about expressing praise and maybe exuberantly, and that you're more faithful the more you are praising God. But but maybe it's true that the more faithful you are is the more you're actually talking to God, no matter what it is. And so, so just keep turning your conversations, your thoughts, when you notice them, to keep taking those to God and just saying, God, here's what I'm thinking. God, here's what I'm feeling. Ask your questions, get specific even with God. But I'll maybe allow the Psalms to even give you words. And then also take some time for some silence also, because I think that now that we're in this space where we've almost been forced to have a Sabbath, we've almost been forced to stop, you know, and our church culture has gotten kind of bad and sloppy at having a Sabbath and really just stopping and just recognizing that God is God and that the world goes around whether or not we are not the ones making the world go around, He is. And so, so just taking some time for some silence and letting whatever it is that's in you to bubble up, because oftentimes our busyness keeps us from really dealing with stuff that's been there. And so we kind of have a chance to do some inner work. So I would say keep talking to God, keep reading the Word, and look to the Psalms if you need some of that language. Think about the stories that maybe you relate to right now, and watch Jesus in the Gospels. But also take just some time to be quiet, to get out in nature. I think when the sun's shining, we're kind of fortunate that spring is here. And so sometimes just being out in God's creation can remind us of who He is and good things. So,
Jason, let me pick on you a little bit because you're in the same boat that I am. We've talked a little bit about this in terms of the physical, biological side, some from the individual spiritual formation side. What strategies would you have for families or for married couples, for example? Because, I mean, this is stressful on a marriage. This is stressful on families. And so what are some family and marital strategies that you would use as we're living in such close quarters together?
Yeah, I really liked what Tanya and Sarah were just sharing. And so some of those thoughts kind of jump off of those. So Tanya just said, you know, keep some structure. And so with that, I would say pay attention to how much screen time we have. Because I feel like the tendency is like, what's next? I gotta know. And before you know it, on your screen twice as much as you had been before. And that then takes away from being physically active and the types of behaviors that can produce, physical health in the midst of that. So I'd say pay attention to screen time. You may even want to do, from a spiritual practice standpoint, of a cutoff time at night, whatever that is. If it's 9 o'clock, if it's 8 o'clock, depending on ages of kids and bedtime routines, just to give a break between screens and bed. That actually allows time to talk, and it allows time to space to kind of calm, breathe, even things of that nature. So I feel like that's one of them. And I would say take advantage of the time that you have from a family standpoint. Like I said earlier, rhythms have completely changed. And so for us, our oldest is a junior and a half is what I like to call it. So he's 17 and he's thinking about, the military or college. And if things were as normal, we would not see him much because he's pretty involved. He's pretty active. He's got a pretty social, active life. All of that is gone, and we get to spend time with him. And so we've had to make sure that we're careful with that time, because it's a cherished moment that we have in time, but really just accentuate it. He smiled a lot, and that's awesome. We love that, right? So to take advantage of your time, build in the rhythms that you've always wanted to have with your family. Sean, you were talking earlier about family devotionals. So for us, when school was in session, the morning times were the time that we were all together. And so that's when we would gather and do our devotions. We've moved that time back. It used to be 6:55. Now we're saying let's go at 8:30. So we get a little bit more sleep in, a little bit slower roll into the day. Our kids are more awake, and we take that half-hour time and we pray and spend time in the midst of that. And then I would say be creative. We do have the option to get outside because the weather's nicer, and we can still hike, and we can still go on walks and bike rides. And so whatever you have as an opportunity, I'd say use that, because that, even just that physical activity, as Tanya was saying, is helping so much of our system in those ways.
Yeah, I think it's been fun in terms of like our kids have had time. For example, my daughter, like my son's birthday, she baked him a cake and it was could have won Cake Wars. I mean, it's like she spent like 7 hours on this cake, you know, and
Wow.
so like she went to town, like fondant, the whole work, all that kind of stuff. And, you know, like just involving our kids in terms of cooking meals or, you know, like trying to do things more together that we maybe normally wouldn't do, or maybe we would do, but they were more rare. And so, as obviously as serious as challenging as this time is, it opens up the door for a lot of cool opportunities we may never get again. So, you know, like, and as much as this is a challenge, and I don't want to minimize that at all, like you were talking about time with kids, I'm in the same boat, a 17-year-old, he's going to go into a senior year next year. And so we're really trying to embrace this and say, okay, God, we know you didn't create this. God, we recognize that there are challenges here that we don't want to minimize. But simultaneously, we want to take what's a challenge here and turn it into a blessing for our family and really leverage this for some sweet time together. And so far, so good. Every once in a while, the train comes off the rails. You know, it happens. It's expected.
Hey, you're doing great because it comes up a lot at our house. So anyway, good for you.
Yeah. So I said every once in a while. That's like more like once a day. But you know, hey, you know. So, but anyway, so I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and wrap up this discussion. But I want to ask this question. Okay, like I just kind of want to open this up in terms of closing thoughts. Like if there was kind of one last thought that each one of you could leave with the audience that you think that would help them through this time, like what would that be? Because you know, like I've said, we're what, 2.5 weeks into this or something like that. There's possibility of going to the end of April and maybe to the end of May. We just don't know yet. And so if you look at this really, you know, even at the worst case scenario, we're not even halfway through yet. So, or I'm sorry, at the best case scenario, we're not even halfway through yet.
Yeah.
So, and I think people are kind of settling into that reality now with some announcements this week and things like that, because people kind of thought, hey, this is going to be a 2-3 week deal, and then we're going to be back in business. And we're just finding out that that isn't true. And so people are now living a little bit more in this reality. So what would be any advice, tip, trick, encouraging word, whatever you guys would like to leave people with? Let me go ahead and start with you, Sarah.
Sure. Well, in light of relationships, I would just encourage people to be gracious with yourself and with others, because when you go through something hard or challenging, if it feels challenging to you this time, when you go through things like that, you tend to probably the worst parts of yourself come out. And so if that's true about how you feel about the person that you're living with or around the most right now, then it's probably true about you as well. And so just encourage you to have grace with yourself and each other. And don't be afraid to reach out to people. And if you've got some trusted friends or people that that would be helpful for you as far as like understand your emotions and things like that, reach out to people and share what's really going on with you, and in safe environments. And we at the church, you know, the pastors are available for you. So like feel free to reach out to us, and that on our eastview.church/online, we have a get help option. And that's where you can figure out how to connect with the church. There's people here that want to help you if you don't have a trusted space. But otherwise, if you have friends that are safe with you and will hear your heart and not tear you up too quickly, and can bear the weight of your soul, then stay connected to people during this.
Tanya, what last piece would you like to leave us with?
I would say allow yourself to grieve. There has been a lot of loss in this, a loss of safety and control, and ideas and visions of what was going to be happening either with yourself or your spouse or with your children, and all these things that we were going to be engaging in that we are not. And so really allowing yourself to grieve those losses. And as we allow ourselves to grieve, then we are able to move through those. And remembering too that we have, every single one of us has experienced something that has been very stressful and overwhelming. And reminding yourself that you have moved through that and you have been able to come out
And just like that, we got cut off at the end of the video because my internet went down. But the good news for you guys is we got 98% of that interview. And so I do apologize to my guest, but just the internet for you. So anyways, if you guys would like to know more about what we discussed, all of our people that I interviewed today left some resources with me. So if you go to eastview.church/mental health, we will provide some resources there along with the link that Sarah was talking about, so that if you feel like you need help, if you need to talk to a pastor or you need referral to a professional counselor, we can help you out. So hang in there. God bless, and thank you for spending some time with us.